Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on this wonderful Thursday morning. It's great to have you all with us, and we're looking forward to you joining us as we learn some fascinating technology about how you can actually improve your traceability. I'm going to take you through a few rules just in terms of housekeeping. So you should be able to hear me, although you can't speak to me. If you can't see us in the big picture, make sure you click on the maximize button in the right-hand corner so that you can see the slide in its full view. Also, just in terms of as we go through the webinar, there's a chat window, so you're welcome to communicate with us via the presentation. And also, please make a note of any questions. You can pop those questions through to us on the chat window or the Q&A section in the on your webinar menu bar, so that we can tackle those questions at the end of Carl's presentation. Please note that if for some reason your signal goes down or the boss calls you and you have to leave, we're going to miss you, but you'll get the recording within a week of the webinar being uploaded onto our site, so you can look out for that. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Kyle Parker. There you see Kyle. Morning, Kyle. It's lovely to have you with us, and thank you so much for joining us. Kyle, you are there, yes?
Yeah. Hi everyone. Linda.
That's great, Kyle. It's always a little disconcerting when you're talking into a box. You're never sure when the person is on the other side. I need to tell you about Kyle because he's a bit of a celebrity. So I'm going to page down to his CV so that you can get to know him a little bit better. He's even got his own website, so perhaps you want to check him out. He's been involved in traceability and solutions for way back, and he's not quite a BC baby. He actually, still was around, but he was around when fax machines were still new and exciting. I remember those days, Kyle, as well, so we obviously have something in common. Kyle started Marvel, an interesting name for a company. You can see how he got the name, and he really started with marking and labeling solutions, but Carl's gets bored easily, I think. That's my impression, because you're constantly looking for new solutions, and so he's been on this journey to now become a world authority on marking, identification and traceability solutions. The organization that he works with, Mitas, partners with a whole lot of overseas leaders in amazing technology, and he's going to be giving us a bit of insight into his experience over the last 20 years, even more than that, and also into some of his new passion, and that being counterfeit or illegal trade. So, Carl, we want to pick your brain about food fraud in the future, definitely. So I'm going to hand over to Kyle. The stage is yours, Kyle. We can't wait to hear about all the super ideas that you and Mitas can offer the food industry in terms of making traceability a really easy. Over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Linda, for the intro. I'm quite excited about this opportunity. So this is our first webinar. It's not going to be the last. It's one that we've put together, which will take a very high-level view of traceability in the food industry overall, some of the things that we're working on, some of the things that we've done, and I'm very enthusiastic about this this opportunity. And then once we've shared this one and we get some feedback, we'll be adding to this. We'll be doing a few more and diving into maybe more specific applications and things that are happening out in the industry. So. Yeah, it will be a real mix. I look forward to any questions that we'll be able to answer for you at the end. But, as I said, this is a very high-level one, and one that I was very proud yesterday to present at the AGBA's Grain event, and learned there yesterday that they're another industry that is really challenged with traceability at the grains level, and what technologies we've got there. Some of that in this presentation as well. So a little bit of background. We're very well known as Traceability Solutions, much in the automotive, industrial sectors, engineering, etc. Engine numbers, VIN numbers, and that. But Mitas is a group that was structured a year ago, which encompasses various divisions that tackle traceability in every industry you can think of. So Mitas was a name we made up because, as you can probably see there, it's made up of marking identification and traceability. Those are the fundamental core parts of the things that we do. We also automate a lot of stuff and provide authentications, and all of these in turn become systems or solutions for customers. So that's the group. We're touching on 3 or 4 of these divisions only, and these solutions that you see in here, many of them have roots for me going back my 29 years in this industry. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of some stats. According to the World Health Organization, about 600 million people in the world fall ill because of contaminated food. And the sad and scary part of this is that 420,000 of these cases result in deaths. That number is quite staggering. And because of this, there is regulations, there is standards and things that are being improved on or being revised and looked at, because the goal is to make sure that with these standards and regulations, there is better quality and of product that is hitting the market, and also that there's record keeping. This is of all the inputs that are coming into the organization, be it the fresh produce or the raw materials, whatever, as well as everything that's going out, as well as the environment in which these products or produce is handled, stored, etc. Guidelines for the labeling. Just going to get some of the foundation stuff discussed first. This is in the advertising of foodstuffs, being Regulation 146. Some of those requirements are date marking, the nutritional information, prohibited statements or negative claims, notifications on allergens, batch identification, country of origin, seasonal ingredients, etc. Okay, so what's the difference between Regulation 638 and 692? That is, if you prepare, transport, or handle or sell food, you must comply with Regulation 638 to meet minimum hygiene requirements. A certificate of acceptability does not only apply to the food premises, but now also applies to the outsourced vehicle used for delivery. So they're making sure that it's not just controlled in one environment, but as far in the value chain as possible. We've got to comply in all aspects, respect to the provisions of the Act as well. And we must keep these applicable records for a period of at least 6 months. The traceability system is maintained so that we can recall all the procedures that were in place. So why is food safety so critical? Well, we all know about the listeriosis outbreak that was detected in October 2017, and the number of cases and how many people were killed because of this situation. Now, when this case came out, it was very difficult for the Department of Health to actually find out where was this problem coming from. And the breakthrough came through when 9 children under the age of 5 became ill from a crash in Soweto. And it was there that they found out there was 2 brands of polony that were being looked at as the possible source, and that was when there was a nationwide recall of this. And according to the World Health Organization, this outbreak is the largest in recorded history. Okay. Now, one of the things I want to bring up right from the beginning here is that we are very big promoters of the Global 1 standard or GS1 standards. We work very closely with GS1 and we're accredited by GS1. As far as we understand, we're the only ones in Africa who are accredited so far. And we use this standard and promote it because it is a common language for all business, and it allows incredible structures for traceability in an ecosystem for all the members of the supply chain. we use there's a big drive, to start using what we refer to as the SGTIN, which is a serialized globally traded identification number. This standard is moving us in the direction of serialization as against what has traditionally been the case of batch identification. So batch identification, there's nothing wrong with it, it's all great, but there is a move to serialization, just like it is in other industries. Every part of a car, every part of an aircraft, everything is serialized. And traceability plays a very important role in creating consumer confidence in a product and brand. And if everybody has different standards, and it makes it quite difficult to share information. And that's one thing that the GS1 standard is very good at, is allowing that visibility to exist for all stakeholders, where only select people can see select information. So not everybody gets to see everything. And this makes it all visible in the supply chain. Yeah, they say don't try and reinvent the wheel. Use what is being done in other industries. So if we talk about serialization, you think, well, wow, how is that done? Well, it's done in automotive. It's done in healthcare in a very big way. Serialized products to the international standard is very big in the healthcare industry, and it's coming in more and more into the FMCG. And also we're seeing this even starting to come into fresh produce and things. It's where the future is. So having your product serialized and have it visible for anybody in the supply chain, serialized, you can start doing a lot more with the information that is on a product. More of that to come. So I want to take a step back and go right up into the earliest stages of a supply chain, and just mention to you some of the things that we do when it comes to fresh produce. And that is where we go right up to the farm level, and it doesn't have to be things that we do. It can be from existing stuff that farmers have or from anybody. But what is important in the supply chain is that you're gathering information. And this information is coming from typical data that is on a farm. So on a farm, before produce is even planted, you have sensors and devices and equipment that is bringing information on the farm about the water content, the total dissolved solvents, temperatures, humidities. All of this information is gathered. And it helps gather the information so that the ultimate crop, when you analyze that crop, you can see how did it come out, and learn from things to make that produce better the next time around, or have a look at what can be done now to help improve the crop. Maybe there's not enough water, so the irrigation and all those things also come into it. So you monitor, you report, and you analyze on your plants and equipment. What we also do is involve other modern technologies like drones and automated implements. And this allows us to have the record keeping of the pesticides, the herbicides, the chemicals and fertilizers that are used in producing the produce. This is all then linked, let's call it on an IoT level, where we monitor all of the farm statistics, where we monitor all the chemicals that are used, what is the GPS locations, because it might have only had an outbreak of some issue in a certain part of the farm. So all of this information is gathered, and this equipment from all this, or the information from this equipment is then gathered and stored in these online platforms as to what happened for the production of this produce. When the produce is being picked, here's an example at the time of harvesting. All the IoT information then is linked to the produce that is being picked. There's an example of where things are going to go in the future, where at the time of picking, things are going to be marked, and that mark on the produce, like that tomato there, that is going to have information on it that will be linked to all the information as to how that produce was grown. And fruit and vegetable at the moment being batch identified, in the future will move to the likes of serialization. Okay, but where's the true value in this? Well, with IoT and analytics, farmers can drive greater efficiencies and more accurate automation than ever. They can increase their yield and their quality. And from farm to retail, the traceability, the visibility, and monitoring of everything in the supply chains is all possible. Ultimately, this gives accountability and proof of connection to the chain stores, restaurants, and the consumers, who ultimately, what it's all about. It's for the consumer. They want to know a lot more than they've ever known before. And I'll give you an example of that. Consumers, when, for example, if they scan their tomato, they want to know sustainability. They want to know, in this hyper-connected world, they want to know that this produce, if it says that it comes from this location, did it come from there? What was the environment? What chemicals were used? Was it grown and environmentally friendly? Was it grown sustainably? And from when it was picked to when I'm receiving it in the store, when I'm about to buy this product, how long did it take from going from the farm to where it's in my hands? And all of this information here is things that are linked to the produce that's being bought. So they want the visibility and accountability back to the consumer in this day of the hyper-connected consumer. So, for example, I'm going to use an example of an apple. At a restaurant, for example, when somebody delivers goods to a restaurant and there's 2 or 3 suppliers of an apple, that restaurant might have a great relationship with one supplier, but it maybe not with so much with another. So in some cases, if the apple is going off, they actually might not know exactly who of the 3 suppliers have supplied that apple. But what can happen is the poor guy that is least favored by the restaurant, for example, he might get a call in and say, look, your apples are no good. Please take your apples back. And in many cases, that is taken back by the supplier because they want to keep a good relationship. They're trying to get in with that particular restaurant, but it might not necessarily be an apple from that supplier. But how do they prove this? How do they show that this is not their apple? Because there is no real markings on the apple, for example. And at a retailer, if I buy something at one retail store, I want to take it back, and I don't want to go to where I really bought it, I can take it back to another one and say, this is an apple that I've got, and there's some problems with it. And there's no proof that travels with the produce in many cases. So this is a consumer. If I scan that apple, me knowing where it comes from and all the information, as I say, is one thing. But as a consumer, me scanning that in a shop, when I'm scanning that, the retail outlet can get involved in this kind of information that's on the scan. So when I'm scanning this apple, and let's say I'm in a pick and pay, the pick and pay could, because of the locationing of your mobile device, can say, hey, Carl, you're scanning this apple. Here's the history of the apple, and this is where we bought it in our supply chain, etc. But did you know that we've got a special today on flour and eggs and such? And here is a restaurant for apple pie. Here's a recipe for apple pie. So the ability to engage with consumer, knowing what they're buying and how you can cross-sell and upsell is a very big thing of the future, we believe. In an IoT solution, though, you're also monitoring the temperatures within the distribution, the transport, the retail, etc. So, for example, when the apple was picked on the farm and everywhere through the supply chain, we use the IoT to monitor the temperature in the pack houses, in the storage facility, in the transportation, in, again, the storage at the retail outlet, ultimately in the display fridge. And where this is going in the future is with the big issues around food waste, there are kind of a standard that says, you know, if you're putting stuff on a shelf and it has a shelf life, the best before, sell by, use by dates are things that cause us to throw food away that is actually still probably quite fine, but you have to put these best before dates and things on. But in future, that won't necessarily be on the product because with the modern technology and the IoT side, we are able to scan the code on the product and tell you this produce will be good for another 10 days or 20 days. And this will be quite dynamic because it will be looking at the IoT on how it was picked and transported and stored that will allow us to have this information to say, okay, this product has a dynamic use date. And this is why the monitoring of fridges in an IoT solution is important, because depending on that fridge will maybe extend or reduce the shelf life of that product in a dynamic way. Okay, here's a video.
The 21st century solution to trace the food, not the cardboard. Safe tracers are edible, non-living, DNA-based barcodes that trace food back to its source in minutes.
Kyle, sorry, won't you move your slide on?
With all natural waxes to reduce moisture loss.
Is it on?
Thanks.
And improve its appearance. Safe tracers.
The video's not playing. Won't you hit play again, please?
Safe tracers.
Is it going now?
Perfect. All good. Thank you. Now it's all good. Thank you.
21st century solution to trace the food, not the cardboard. Safe tracers are edible, non-living, DNA-based barcodes that trace food back to its source in minutes. After harvest, most produce is washed and coated with all-natural waxes to reduce moisture loss, extend its shelf life, and improve its appearance. Safe tracers integrate quickly and easily with the existing wash and coating process. The safe tracers are added to the wax or any other coating, and the produce is processed as usual. Every single piece of produce now carries its complete source information. Even the source of produce that has been mixed and stored for months can be easily identified. Reading the Safe Tracer's source information is easy. Collect a sample and run a simple test that takes only a few minutes and doesn't require any special skills. Safe Traces provides all the supplies needed. The produce source and lot information is available online in minutes. Starting at $2 per ton of produce, Safe Tracers offers source assurance with 21st century accuracy and speed. Safe Tracers, trace the food, not the cardboard.
Okay, there's the one video. I've got another one that is linked to that one from the same company. This is very exciting technology because this is something that has not necessarily been so easy to do in the past. And this is a covert or a forensic level of traceability that travels with the food. This can be put on, and you've seen in the video, on an apple. It can be put on in wet produce. It can be put on dry produce and things like fruits and vegetables. One of the issues that affects health is around how things are cleaned. So the next video will show us how you can monitor the cleaning of fresh produce.
Introducing Sanitracers. Sanitracers, on-site wash process validation, verification, and monitoring. Introducing Sanitracers, a revolutionary new way to ensure that fresh produce is not just healthy and delicious, but also meets the highest safety standards. Fresh produce becomes naturally contaminated in the field from soil, birds, and animals. To ensure that it is free of harmful bacteria, the produce is washed before it is sold to consumers. Millions of pounds of safe produce are processed each year, but even small variations in the wash can leave some produce contaminated and unsafe for consumption. And that can cause diseases, deaths, and hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. Sanitracers are here to solve the problem. They are delivered to the processors, ready to use. Sanitracers are tiny, safe food particles tagged with seaweed DNA that in a produce wash system behave exactly like bacteria. The Sanitracers attach, detach, transfer, and degrade in chlorinated water, very much like real pathogens. A few product samples and a very simple on-site test are all that is needed to alert the processors if variations in the wash system have left the produce vulnerable to contamination. The results are available in minutes. The SaniTracers Index gives processors confidence that their wash system reduces contaminants and fights cross-contamination to deliver fresh produce that meets the highest safety standards. SaniTracers, on-site wash process validation, verification, and monitoring for healthy, delicious, and safe produce.
Okay. So there's some examples of what we can do right up at the early stages of the fresh produce from the farm, the traceability of that on the farm. What I've got here now, we're just going to touch on a high level, some other safety and inspection equipment that's used in the food industry. This is where you have things like metal detectors, X-ray machines, check weighers, rejection systems. These are all systems that are used to make sure that, again, we remove any problematic produce from the supply chain. So something that we complement in a traceability system. Whenever we're doing marking, identification, and traceability, we often tie into quality control equipment, and it's equipment like this that is used for making sure that if we are going to reject, it's going to be rejected on contaminants or reasons why this produce shouldn't hit the market. Not only of these systems here that I've mentioned, but also on visioning systems and other systems like dimensioning, X-rays and metal detectors, etc. Right, and it's getting rid of that human error factor. Something else then, once you've passed all of those quality controls, you're getting more towards the product that is fit to go out into the market. Labeling and tagging systems. We're doing these on either by blowing it on or wrapping around or wiping it on, putting these overt and consumer-focused information on the product. The labels also have a dual purpose, not only showing the relevant information, but it can also be used as a form of brand protection with tamper evidence and other security things that are coming more and more these days. All right. So doing what is already done, learning from other industries like pharmaceutical, automotive, engineering, medical, FMCG, you're starting to see more and more use of machine-readable codes. So what is coming? The marking, we do see it already with food-grade inks on eggs, but it will also go to lasers. You're seeing marks like this over here onto bread. While we're seeing it just the way it's going in the food industry, it's very much like it is when I go back to my early days in marking. Initially, it is just man-readable information, and as it goes from man-readable information, alphanumerics, it's moved into machine-readable codes. Likewise, in the food and the FMCG industry, we're starting off with a direct laser marking or direct ink marking onto produce, but eventually this will also turn into a 2D code for machine-readable information on a product. We are already doing some projects for some big retailers where we're marking onto fresh produce. At the moment, man-readable information, but soon to be very much going into machine-readable codes for consumer engagement, etc. Right. The definition of food traceability relates to the ability to follow the flow of the product and the ingredients forwards and backwards in a supply chain. The edible thermal inkjet is something that is a low-cost method of printing, and you can do this with visible or invisible inks. This has been a challenge up to now because people don't really want to think that they're going to be eating ink on a product. And we've done a calculation that if you wanted to have a piece of cake that has food grade coloring or food grade inks in that, you'd have to eat over 200 apples, or 200 sections of that of 200 apples that has the best before or sell by date on it, for you to eat as much ink as there is on that piece of cake. So we can't eat a piece of cake, but we have this block on food grade inks on products. So in some cases, it's very covert, being UV inks or infrared inks. But we will start seeing, hopefully, especially on produce where you peel off the skin or the hard-shelled items, these inks we hope to see a little bit more. And this is the drive to mark directly on fruit and vegetable because of the use of single-use plastics, getting away from using the plastics and the packaging and marking directly onto the food, sometimes known as naked food. So here's some examples of this. So there's a mind shift that has to happen with the consumers, but the laser marking seems to be quite well accepted already, and that's something we're going to see more of, as you'll see in the future, which at the moment is a little bit of information, and still your best befores and sell by dates, and soon in the future we'll see some 2D codes going on that. The benefits of the new food is obviously the less single-use plastics, and also not putting the labels, the printing of those labels that go onto the fresh produce at times. There's the printing process, there's the backing materials, the actual label itself, the glues. Marking direct on there with a laser is very much more environmentally friendly. And the consumer can still easily identify, and with that being permanent on the product, the issues earlier that I spoke about of sending it back to a different retailer or supplier is not possible, because this is really on the product for the life of the product. So using the laser marking, some of the things that we've been doing is on bread, on thick skin fruit, on eggshells, coconuts and other nuts. Those are things that we've been working on, and there's some others that we're working on now as well in other industries. More on that later. So putting this all together in the digital area, why are we doing it? We're doing it for compliance. In some cases, we're doing it for marketing, for visibility, authentication. A good supply chain system, a good traceability system must use something that's existing, and that's why we promote the GS1 standard, and getting this down to a unit level traceability or serialization. It's fine for now to still do it in a batch level, but it's a move to going to serialization, using on-product marking, or what we refer to as direct part marking. It's an acronym that we've used from other industries, more engineering, automotive side of things, but we're using it here as well because technically we're still doing that. We're marking directly on the product. And there's various levels of marking options for this traceability, visibility, and authentication. We mark and identify as early in the supply chain as possible, because the information that you put on the product is only as good as the information you're putting in, which starts as early in the supply chain as possible. And then you share this information across whichever levels you need to within the supply chain, and gathering the information as you go and sharing that, so that at the end the retailer's got the information they need, or the consumer has the information to make an informed decision. And ultimately, this is where we see everything going in the future, is a lot of consumer engagement when they're doing the scans. When they scan that apple on a product, you're getting the location of the scan from the consumer. You're getting to know that consumer is what they're buying, where they're buying it, what do they like. There's a lot of marketing stuff that's going to come out of this serialization in the future. Another big drive around the traceability is also with regards to food waste. This is a hot topic at the moment as well. There's a big drive to reduce the amount of waste we have, and correct marking and labeling and traceability is very important in helping reduce this food waste. In SA, there's about 12.6 million tons of food that goes to waste every year. And if you think about how many people go hungry, this is just it's unacceptable. We can't waste so much food when it can be diverted, reused in other ways to feed those who don't have it. And government has made a global commitment. Government has made a global commitment to have food waste reduced by half by 2030. An initiative that is run by the government, and this also helps all of us in having food security. Right. So my last slide here is just mentioning the reasons for the wastage that we have, and a lot of the reasoning for the food waste, which some of them, as you see them come up here, while they're important, one of the big ones is actually the date coding and batch coding marking of the produce, because when it says that it's going to expire, we say it's expiring today, we sometimes people will throw it out, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to expire there. And that's why we see the changes in the way produce is labeled and marked and identified. And with the best befores and sell by dates, when it becomes a 2D code, all of this will become more dynamic. And there's some exciting stuff that's going to be happening on our mobile devices in the future as well that will tell us that the food, just from a scan, is still safe to eat, never mind what the sell-by date is. So yeah, that's it at a high level as our first intro webinar on what it is that we do at a high level. And yeah, we look forward to being able to dive into some of these solutions a little bit more in the future with you.
Kyle, that was fascinating. I have to say, looking at what you can put onto bread and what you can put onto fruit and how you can label it is absolutely fascinating. I think we've all kind of gotten used to, you know, seeing a few little letters on our eggs, because I know that there's some of the retailers have been doing that for a while. But having a look at my apple with the different eyes in the future is definitely, something to look forward to. If I can, I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions with regards to, how you see this going, and how easy is it for a company to actually deploy some of these activities. If I have to take a the new requirements within Regulation 638 now do not give any, what's the right word? They don't give any leeway with regards to traceability systems. In other words, all of us have to have some level of traceability. And I think your point about as far down the supply chain is definitely something that can be is important to consider. But if I had to take a small facility that's producing maybe only 1,000 units a day, for example, and we could be talking about a produce that's already packed, or like you said, the naked food aspects. What are we looking at in terms of these kinds of solutions? How many kidneys am I going to have to sell to look at a solution like this?
Okay, a traceability system, actually they don't start off as something that you have to go in full hog and do a big elaborate system. They can start off very modular, very small. A simple little thermal inkjet printer on a production line could start you off with doing the marking with food grade ink, for example, onto fresh produce. You're talking about less than 50,000 Rand for a machine that can start putting date codes and markings directly onto the produce. If things speed up, you've got a little bit of maybe conveying, or maybe you want to go to laser that then doesn't use the ink, that it's more directly on a product. Yes, you're a little bit higher initial costs, but your running costs go low. But one of the things you're going to see about this naked food is down the line, as it's adopted more and more and people accept it, and moving away from the plastics. When you remove the plastics and the labeling and all the rest of it, this actually is more environmentally friendly, and it's cheaper to do than the way we're doing it at the moment. So there is a very big incentive for everyone in the supply chain to go this route, because it is a cheaper way of doing it ultimately. But you can start off very, very inexpensively with a simple printer and maybe a little back-end platform to do your record keeping.
If I if I look at the concerns that we have around food waste, I completely agree with you, and I know that we both, sitting on the same working group to try and get a national project, in place where the whole country is considering these aspects. But if I take date coding currently onto fresh produce, if I buy a packet of apples now, there's going to be some identification on the packet of apples. I'm then going to put those apples into my fruit basket, and I'm going to use my eyes for the most part to determine whether or not they're still edible. And I think for most of us, that's kind of like how we currently measure the best before date for our produce. When my oranges are in my fruit basket and they start to go a little bit green with mold, well, obviously they're not fit to use, but I'm not necessarily going to throw them away if the label said that they were best before a certain date, because I can see that they're still suitable for consumption. And I'm talking now about, hard skin fruit or fruit with skin, the way that you've been talking about your labeling process. Do you not foresee that if we start to put labels directly onto those, fruits and veg, that we could actually have an increase in food waste, because the consumer will now not be looking at the packaging, which was thrown away a couple of days ago or a couple of weeks ago, but they'll actually be looking at that marking, as opposed to judging just visually whether that apple or orange butternut is still suitable for consumption.
Yeah, okay, it's a good point. And that's where some of the terminology that is being discussed in some of these food waste discussions that we have, terminology like use before or best before. Consumers, when they see a best before, just that terminology saying best before doesn't mean that after that date it's still not something we can still consume. But we're less likely to throw out fruit and veg that we can have a look at and see, okay, this bread or this apple, it still looks good. It's a guideline, the best before dates and things. But if we see that it's still okay, we are more likely to use that fruit and veg, or at least that's how it is in our household. However, some products that say best before, let's say, for example, I'll take another one in the fridge, maybe it's yogurt, and it says, okay, it's expired yesterday. Sometimes we don't even open that to see if it's still okay, and those guidelines are there just to say it's used by, but many of us don't open that up and actually see that it's still okay, and in many cases it is. I've often opened a yogurt up that's a week after the expiry, and it can still be quite fine. It also depends on how you're storing it and the temperatures and that. But there's going to be a big initiative, as you know, coming up in the future from government and from industry to start getting consumers to use the best befores and sell by dates and that as a guideline. But let's look at trying to use that food even after the best before and sell by dates. It's just too easy to throw this food away. And not only that, the other programs that are coming in are things that if it's getting close to a sell by date or a use by and you're not going to use it, there's going to be ways of getting this back into a chain, that this can go and be used to make soups and things that are going to be used that same day, and things that can, once it's used, for example, if it's vegetables and it's going to go off and you're not going to use it, that this goes into a facility that goes and makes soups, that then now you can extend the life of that produce, because that soup now is something that's been, you've used the vegetables, you've now made your soup, and you put it into the market and you're extending what was the life of that old fruit and veg.
Yes, no, absolutely, and I'm all for those. I think what we have ahead of us is a lot of consumer education, because if we had to take certain products, high risk products, processed meats, for example, given our experience with the listeriosis outbreak, that would be the kind of product where we really do want people to take the use by date very seriously, because of the possibility that there could be listeria contamination, and it unfortunately grows in the fridge. So there's definitely a very clear need to help consumers to distinguish between what would be high-risk food and what would be low-risk food when it comes to expiry dates. I agree. I think many products, the quality of the product may be affected, but definitely not the safety aspect. So lots of work in that department. I think what's also interesting to see, and what would be interesting to see, is what is the drive from the consumer with regards to knowing about the life of their apple, and are our consumers pushing for that, or is that something that's very Eurocentric coming from the US, but is not something that's happening in South Africa? What's your experience in that regard?
We're seeing a lot of activity within the food industry as a whole, with the different regulations, with the issues that we've had in the past, for example, the listeriosis, with the government initiatives now that are going around the food safety, food security and things. There's definitely very much a heightened sense of making sure everybody is doing their little bits to reduce the plastics, to improve the way we communicate with the consumers. But using the technology and the best before dates and things like that as an example is right now we see it as best befores and used by dates on a product. But in the future, being the 2D code on a product, let me take the example of an avocado. They will be picked, and if typically from the time that avocado is picked until it is in the stores, let's say that is 1 week, but they can actually be stored for a long time in refrigeration, and you would still have the traceability to know when that avo was picked, even though it might be stored at like 1 degree for 2 months, because it has slowed the process of ripening so much so that it's okay to know that it was stored in a certain way. And if you had a 2D code on that avo, because you're talking about marking directly onto the avo at source, if that was a 2D code, but linked to that 2D code when it was picked is all its information and its history, but also through the supply chain, through the transportation to where it's stored, etc. And that technology then on the avo in the store, when I scan it, because it won't have a sell-by date, it will be dynamic. It will be something that will say this is where it came from, where it was stored, etc. And this then will tell you, based on the fact that this was now brought up to these temperatures at this time, at this date, should give you this avo would come ripe in about 4 days or 5 days time. Because sometimes we buy avos, for example, and 1 or 2 might be ripened, others might not be, and this is where all of these codes and the dynamics of the back end of the IoT side, for example, is going to start giving us the ability to see, I can buy something now and know that it's only going to get ripe in a week or 2 weeks time, and that's when I actually need it to come ripe. So this is where the technology and
the exciting things that are coming in the future, and I'm sure if anyone sees what's happening and what other options are possible for your particular traceability problems. So thank you so much to Kyle from Mitas, and we look forward to chatting to you again with one of those other webinars. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.